welcome again to IDPro's vlog series, Getting to Know IDPro. Today, we're going to be talking with Joni Brennan. She is the president of DIAC. Thank you so much for being here, Joni. We're excited to talk with you.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to have this conversation on such important topics. So thanks for the invitation.
We are excited to learn more about DIAC. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump in with some questions that we've pulled together. So first, really wanting to understand a little bit more, who is DIAC? What are you guys all about? And can you just kind of give us an overview, how you got started and that sort of good stuff?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the great question. So DIAC stands for Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada. Who we are actually, we're starting our 10th year of operation, which is exciting. So that's about how far we go back. And so way back in the global financial crash around 2008, 2009, our federal government of Canada, the Minister of Finance, Minister Flaherty, called for an electronic payments task force to be created to review our payment system in light of the global financial crash and to make sure that the payment system was robust and secure. And so this task force was made up from leaders of the public and the private sector. And they published a report out a few years later. And in that report, what they recommended was a few key things concerning, who we are. Number one, they recommended that the payment system in Canada needed digital ID to be the best and most secure that it could be. That we needed a digital identity and authentication framework, hence the DIA for DIAC, and that this framework should be co-created by the public and the private sector, and that a self-governing body should be created where the public and the private sector could come together to develop and deliver this framework. And so that's really our kind of origin story for how we came to be. We did come out of finance, and really that origin story is why we as an organization, we are a nonprofit. We're about 110 members strong. That's why we as an organization really look at digital identity through the economic benefits for all lens. That looking at it through that lens brings public sector to the table, private sector to the table. Economic benefits and societal benefits for everyone is something that everybody feels is important. So that's who we are, and that's why many of the banks are participating. And that's really kind of shaped that lens that we've taken to look at solving digital identity and all of the different functions and features around it to improve people's lives and secure Canada's full and beneficial participation in the global digital economy.
So is that kind of your mission? It sounds like you guys had a very specific starting point because of a very unique demand, essentially. So is that your mission now going forward, or has it enhanced or changed?
Yeah, so our mission is, it's interesting because we are a digital identity focused organization, and we're based in Canada. Our actual mission is to develop and deliver a digital ID and authentication framework to secure Canada's full and beneficial participation in the global digital economy. So we are actually an economic benefits focused organization, and we see digital identity as the tool by which to secure that benefit to every Canadian, whether they're in this the urban cities or the rural landscapes. And so we see that mission from our instantiation just about 10 years ago to today. We see that as unchanged. And so what we've delivered collaboratively with the public and private sector is what's called a pan-Canadian trust framework. And that's a very high level framework for addressing digital identity assurance and interoperability. And that framework is technology neutral. And so you can take this pan-Canadian trust framework and you can implement it for governance and information assurance, identity assurance, using across different technologies, whether that's a traditional identity federation, a trusted operator network, or something like a very distributed self-sovereign identity network. And so we've delivered that framework, and now we're poised and looking forward to launching a trust mark program program for organizations who would be compliant, to be verified as compliant with the framework. So that's one pillar of what we do. The second pillar of what we do is we bring together and matchmake. We help different organizations to matchmake, to develop proof of concepts, really to deliver kind of move fast projects that we can learn fast from, and help to see where and how adoption can be moved forward, so reduce uncertainty toward adoption of digital identity. That in turn informs the framework, which is the long-term strategy. And the third pillar of what we do is what we call outreach. And so that's everything from how we review and make consultations about public policy, to the kinds of narratives, how we talk about digital identity. And through that channel, we've done digital identity research where we've asked people what their thoughts are on digital identity and information sharing, because among ourselves, we certainly, we all love to talk about digital identity, but, do general people out in the public know what digital identity is? And so that outreach group does that kind of research and that kind of engagement, as well as more. And so we think that by really pulling the lens back on the context of what's important about standards, what's important about technology, what's important about public policy, we from a DIAC perspective, we pull the lens back and look at how all of these pieces fit together, because we think you do need all of these pieces to move identity forward, and no single piece actually works to solve the complete digital identity picture, just like no single organization can really go out and solve everything that you need for digital identity as well.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I'm taking it just, from listening to you talk and understanding a little bit more about how DIAC came about, that you've probably got some pretty good experience in the identity industry. So, and you're obviously the president of DIAC. So I'm curious, how did you personally get involved in this industry? What drew you to it?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. I've been in the digital identity industry probably for close to 20 years now. I just kind of fell into it, to be honest, in a sense. From university, in my university, I learned about standards, and I thought that standards were something that was really interesting, because working on standards is taking different organizations, perhaps with different priorities and different agendas, who all see a common issue that they want to work on, something common that they want to solve. And so I really love the idea of the kind of standards ecosystem and what kind of collaboration that brings. And so happened that I was co-located where my university was by IEEE, which is one of the world's largest standards associations. And so through that, I kind of got into the standard space, and I worked on many different kinds of organizations for voice technology, for different kinds of how printers connect with each other. And then one of the groups that I started working with was focused on digital identity, and that was a group called Liberty Alliance. And right away, I could see in my work that digital identity really kind of had that human intersection compared to the others that were a bit more, very, very technical. And absolutely, identity is technical. But I think, from my view, digital identity is really about kind of that intersection of people and technology and culture, and kind of how all these pieces fit together, and policy. And, so to me, it was just so multidisciplinary and so human centered that that's what made it stand out above kind of all of the other projects I had been working on. So that's kind of how I fell into it. And I started in that group, like about 20 years ago. And I think, kind of a lot of people in identity, they do fall into it. Also, once you get into it, it's quite often that you don't leave because it is such a compelling space to work in. So that's how I got into it. And also that's why I think an organization like IDPro, or Identity Professionals, is so important, because digital identity is often kind of coming under the umbrella of something else. It's in the umbrella of cybersecurity, or it's in the umbrella of data protection, or it's in the umbrella of user experience. And so having a place where digital identity is really kind of the center, and we look at all of the other features as modifying the digital identity as the root, that's what's, for me, so exciting about IDPro.
That's great. Yeah. So is that what drew you back or drew you into IDPro and what made DIAC really get involved there?
Yeah, definitely. That is, having that place where we could come and recognize the specificness of the digital identity practice, where we could co-create the different resources that are, that professionals would need, and that's an ongoing process, because this is an ongoing space as technology evolves, as culture evolves. Yeah, and I think back to a talk from Ian Glazer when he had a talk that was called "Killing IAM in Order to Save It." And in that talk, there's one line I always think about, which is, he said, identity needs to be a part of everything we do and not a part away, So it's kind of like, you have to think about identity as included in everything that you're doing, versus as some sort of structure that kind of sits on the side. Oh, and we need identity. It's like, no, you have to have identity in by design. And so that talk right there, that was kind of a real inspiration point on recognizing that many of us had really kind of, if not all of us, had really kind of learned the practice of identity on the job. Maybe we got a cybersecurity job, it turned out to be identity. Maybe we got a standards job and it turned out to be identity. And so to have a place where we could actually help others to have a more structured and informative way to learn the different features and the different skills, and those that will come forward that are yet to come, that to me is what's so compelling about IDPros.
No, that's great. So for you yourself, what are you most excited about coming out of the industry, or coming up in the future? What do you see as the new thing on the horizon that really gets you excited?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely excited about public-private collaboration, like what we do in DIAC. I'm excited about our Trustmark program for the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework. That's it's called Voila Verified. So I'm excited for that level of operationalization. But pulling the camera lens back, what I'm very excited for is kind of new way of looking at interoperability. And I would say that looking at interoperability and how systems and solutions work together, in years past, that feature has been more about saying, okay, we're an organization that is deploying OpenID Connect, or we're an organization that's deploying SAML. So taking a specific technology with a specific implementation profile and then verifying that other actors are using that profile and that they actually can work together. So that was kind of original flavor of interoperability. And where we see the space going from a DIAC perspective is much more toward recognizing that there will be a number of networks for information verification and sharing. And those networks will be built on different technologies with different governance. And so, if we're talking in kind of identity foundational language, this is really just federations. I think about networks as being federations, but we'll see these different networks. And so what's going to be interesting, and what's interesting about interoperability as we go forward, that it's really about, can data be portable? Can verified data be portable about an identity or an identity itself, or a credential or an attribute? Can that data be portable, and can it be trusted across and in different networks built on different technology with different governance? And that's a very different way of looking at interoperability, because now you're kind of talking more about data portability and what I would call interfederation, versus kind of looking at a specific technology for a specific community. And so I think that's really exciting, because I in my experience, identity has never been a space where a single technology is going to solve everything for every use case. It's more like maybe one technology works better for one community and one use case than another. And so, so this is what's compelling about this space, is how can we kind of work across these different technologies and these different contexts? And I think that kind of view has a real shot at lasting over time, because that's more realistic as to what we've been seeing in the space for the last 15, 10 years as technologies and their uses have evolved.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. No, that's really exciting. I'm so glad you had a chance today to share this with us. I think it was great talking with you. I know you guys have a lot going on right now, a lot of planning, a lot of activity. So good luck with that. And thanks again for your time today, Joni.
Thanks so much for the invitation. It was a real pleasure to have this conversation, and I certainly encourage everyone to go check out, everything that IDPro has to offer. Get involved. It's a friendly group of people and professionals, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with others and seeing what more IDPros has to offer as we go forward together. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much.